Every new season brings with it early surprises, but what's happening in Milwaukee right now is downright shocking. With only 2 wins from their first 10 games, the Bucks sit 14th in the East and 29th overall. And unlike the decimated Sixers, the Bucks can't point to injuries as an excuse. Sure, Chris Middleton is yet to play this season, but Giannis Antetokounmpo has only missed 1 game, while Damian Lillard and Brook Lopez are among a handful of Bucks rotation players who've suited up every night. Giannis leads the league in scoring, and his offensive partnership with Dame is going much smoother than last year. Lopez, meanwhile, remains an elite rim protector. Where has all that gotten Milwaukee? The Bucks have been outscored with both Dame and Giannis on the court and have barely won the minutes with all 3 of Antetokounmpo, Lillard, and Lopez out there. The schedule is about to ease up. Middleton's return will help on the offensive end, and the Bucks can't possibly be this bad. But the team around Giannis is simply too old, too unathletic, and filled with too many one-way players at this stage of their careers. They're also a second apron team severely limited in the moves they can make. Andre Jackson is their only young talent, and they can't trade a draft pick until 2031. The Bucks don't even own a second rounder for the rest of the decade. Milwaukee obviously has nothing to gain from punting on the season or rebuilding, but I'd expect Giannis to take matters into his own hands sooner than later. If we can spot this sinking ship, no doubt the captain can too, and he's not going to let what's left of his prime go down with it. And with that, welcome to the Unfiltered Show from theScore Studios. My name is Joseph Casciaro. That's Joe Wolfond. That's Michael Chandler. Chandler, thanks for dressing up, man, by the way.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get right into this. Wolfond, you wrote this week about the kind of, I don't want to call them positive signs, but the silver linings we can try to find in this deplorable Buck start, and perhaps why there is room for optimism and hope going forward. So enlighten us, enlighten me, tell me why everything I just said was wrong, or most of what I just said was wrong.
I like this. This has become my role on the show. Last time you brought me on to talk you down from your Nuggets doomerism, and look at them now. They're flying high, 7-3.
I did say at the time the Nuggets would cruise to the playoffs,
Ah.
but that they were not built anymore to win big.
Yeah, and I will add that I am not nearly as confident in the Bucks turning things around as I was in the Nuggets doing that. But I don't think it's nearly as bad as it's looked so far, especially on offense. Like, there's just no way that this is going to be anything close to a bottom 10 offense come the end of the season. I think it's really encouraging that Dame has looked as good as he has, considering last year was kind of a down year for him. And we were wondering, is that because he's 34 years old and is on the decline, or is it because of all the reasons that he cited, which is, there was a lot going on in his personal life. Obviously, he's moving NBA cities for the first time, feeling unsettled. Didn't get anything resembling an offseason or training camp to, get into a good rhythm or flow individually or with his new Bucks teammates. So I think he's looked awesome. Giannis has been unbelievable. And I think you can look at some of the numbers underlying their offensive struggles and just assume that some of them are going to change. Like, this has been one of the worst shooting teams in the league. I don't think they actually are that, especially if you look at some of the specific players who have struggled shooting the ball.
We got the numbers up there. You can see it.
So there you go. Yeah, Brook Lopez, Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis, Gary Trent. These are established good shooters who are just shooting the ball terribly right now. And you can filter that out wide open threes. Lopez, Portis, and Trent specifically, of the 4 players on the Bucks who are taking the most wide open threes this season, 3 of those 4 guys are Lopez, Portis, and Trent. And those 3 guys combined to shoot 45% on wide open threes last year. Trent in particular, he was the best wide open 3-point shooter in the league last year, 51%, and they're combining to shoot 27% on open threes this year. Stuff like that is going to change. I also think, the defense is not going to be good. I don't think they have the personnel to be a good defense. I do think they're capable of being better than they've been. And just getting a few more stops is going to help them at the offensive end as well, because they'll get more opportunities for runouts, and this is a team that is capable of being absolutely devastating in transition. Giannis leading the league in transition scoring for the 7th year in a row. The more opportunities that they can get to get out in the open floor, the better.
They can also be devastated going the other way in transition.
That's 100% true. And so I think it's fair to ask, because there have not been a lot of indicators in terms of process or results that would suggest that this is going to turn around defensively. I'm talking about like incremental improvements just when it comes to stuff like attention to detail, focus, effort. And this is a veteran team. And like,
it's kind of embarrassing that that's what we're having to talk about.
It is. But I think you could also say this is the kind of stuff that could improve. Not
Fair.
by a lot, because there are physical limitations. Their perimeter defense is not going to be good. But you're seeing a ton of games where it's just mistake after mistake. Two guys rotating to the same offensive player, just losing track of guys in transition, blown rotations, things like that, where those are the things that I think could be smoothed out with time, with a little bit more focus. And I would point to that and say, I mean, like, even Giannis, right? Like, we know what Giannis has been historically as a defender. I don't think he is quite at the level that he was in the past. But he also started really slowly defensively last season as well. And by the end of the year, he was back up to being all defensive caliber. So I think that's happened again this year. He's gotten off to a slow defensive start. I would expect him to sort of ratchet that back up. I think, putting Andre Jackson Jr. in the starting lineup, whether that's going to stay or not, like that will help their perimeter defense.
Yeah, Chandler, well. I saw you the face you were making as soon as Bucks defense came up, and you got some thoughts on.
Well, I mean, if Wolfond's here to be an optimist, I'm here to rain on that parade a little bit. And while I do agree that the offense should experience an uptick, I just don't see it defensively. They're currently 21st in the NBA in offensive rating, 22nd in defensive rating. And for the first time in Giannis's career, he's averaging less than 1 block and 1 steal per game, which shows that his measurables are down. Sure, he and Lopez are still a major deterrent in the paint and at the rim. But I don't share the same optimism Joe does. As much as it pains me to say that, you can't put lipstick on a pig. Someone famously once said that. Well, I don't want to go to such an extent, but their one saving grace might be that the Eastern Conference is an absolute dumpster fire. Yeah. And heading into Tuesday night's action, there are only 2 teams above 500, the Cleveland Cavaliers and Boston Celtics. So do I anticipate that they will continue with the same winning percentage? No. I do anticipate that they will be a top 6 team. But again, Chief Executive John Horst has mortgaged the future to placate Giannis and has built the team around Giannis. And like you said, they have no tradable assets unless someone wants to take a flyer on Bobby Portis, who appears to have regressed this year. No tradable assets through 2030. So the future is looking incredibly bleak.
Yeah, and listen, like, I'm not even going to dump on the moves that got them here because, trading for Drew Holiday helped them win a championship. The franchise's first in 50 years. Flipping Holiday for Dame is one I think we all saw as a no-brainer at the time, even though it obviously backfired spectacularly. So I'm not even going to say the moves that got them here, like, they bungled it. It's just that this is what they are now. And in evaluating what they are right now, with no hope to get better, they do not look anywhere near good enough. Like, okay, yeah, that's the understatement of the year. They're 2-8, but it's like the way they've gone there. And Wolfond, like, even your points about some of the things they can do better, like the effort stuff, the attention to detail. It's a veteran team as win now and as all in as a team can get. And we're having to sit here talking about, like, well, if they sharpen their focus, I guess the next question is, and again, if you are looking for like any straw to grasp at, is that Chris Middleton hasn't played yet.
Kind of a big deal.
It is, and we saw even last year in the playoffs for a guy that was still coming off injury already later in his career could make a big difference. Yeah. But are we putting a little too much faith, or are the Bucks putting a little too much faith in a 33-year-old who just had both ankles surgically repaired?
Yeah, he got a Groupon for 2-for-1 ankle surgeries in the summer, and while to Wolfond's point, he might help offensively because they're having a hard time putting the ball in the bucket, and he can certainly augment in that department. He's not going to help out defensively. And I think I kind of want to mention Doc Rivers here because over the second half of Doc's coaching career, he's become sort of a lightning rod for derision, if you will. And a lot of people and pundits alike are saying, oh, he's an easy fix, get him out. And we're looking down the bench at Darvin Ham, who, for a basketball purist, will try to, erase his tenure with the Lakers from their minds. But I don't necessarily think he's the answer either. even though reportedly Giannis was the reason that Ham rejoined the Bucks because Giannis is a fan of his. But I think Doc has done an okay job this year. He's tinkered with the rotation, which is something Giannis has publicly commended him for, and he's given AJ Green a chance, and he's worked Jackson into the starting five at the expense of Gary Trent Jr., who is a 3-and-D guy who's not doing either of those things particularly well at the moment. So it's not like he has a lot to work with.
Yeah. So quickly back to the Middleton point, like, are the Bucks putting like too much faith in him coming back and fixing everything? Probably, but they have literally no other choice.
Right.
Like, what are they supposed to do?
Yeah.
They have to hope that he can come back and make this better. And I will say, like, maybe their biggest problem, definitely their biggest problem offensively right now, is they don't have anybody who can create off the dribble other than Giannis and Dame.
Yeah.
Like, nothing. So just having Middleton come back, even if, no, athletically he's not the same as he was, defensively he's nowhere near the player that he was, but having a guy who can capably handle the ball, create shots for himself and others, I mean, I think it's hard to understate how big of an impact that's going to have in the trickle-down effect of just not having to be that reliant on Giannis and Dame and Giannis to create everything for them offensively.
And also, that also speaks to the, like, how devastating it's been that Gary Trent has been as bad as he has. Listen, anyone who's watched the Raptors the last few years or watched Trent's career, know he can be a streaky shooter, and defensively he's a gambler whose, like, defensive impact is never going to match his steals total. But this is the worst I've ever seen him play. Wolfond, you mentioned in a conversation to me, you think he's been maybe the worst player, or at least rotation player in the league this year. I think he's certainly been the worst defensive player in the league this year, and it compounds when, because of that, the Bucks then have to replace him in the starting lineup with an Andre Jackson, who is a complete offensive zero, when, to your point, they're already lacking that kind of, like, self-creation guy who can create off the dribble. One of the few guys who can outside their big two was supposed to be Gary Trent, and they can't play him a lot right now because he's an absolute sieve on the defensive end. And that also kind of gets to the Doc point of, like, what Chandler was saying, and I think we can all agree. I'll let you have your piece on this too. But, like, we've talked, off air about how we actually think the criticisms of Doc had gone so far one way over the years that he might have only almost become underrated as a coach, or at least he wasn't quite as bad as people were making him seem. And, like, this isn't on him. I don't think there's necessarily a coaching miracle or decision that can change this, but it doesn't look great given that the guy he replaced was 30-13 at the time.
Yeah, and this is maybe going to surprise you because I feel like I'm usually, like, the coaching apologist on this program, but if you look at the things that are plaguing the Bucks in terms of all the stuff we're talking about, in terms of, like, attention to detail, blowing rotations, and, like, some nights where they're just showing up, frankly, not really prepared to play. Like, the game against the Knicks the other night, like, they just weren't prepared to play. And look, I think Doc Rivers is maybe, like, a better X's and O's coach than he has been given credit for over the years, but he's not one of the best tacticians in the NBA.
Yeah.
He's known as, like, a motivator. That's why they brought him in, was to come in, like, motivate guys, get them on the same page, bring the locker room together. That's the stuff that's supposed to be his bread and butter. So when you're seeing a team that is not looking together, is not looking motivated, is not giving maximum effort, then of course that has to fall on him. Yeah. Like, these guys are showing up and they're not ready to play. And
Giannis has said they have no identity.
And the coach has to eat some of the blame. So would it be different? Would it look better with somebody else on the sidelines? To this point, with the way that certain things have gone, with the way that certain players' shooting has regressed, with the defensive limitations on the roster, I don't know that it would be anything significant, but I don't think we can give Doc a pass for the way that they've looked either.
And surely a lot of the onus is on the players. They are simply not doing the fundamental and easy parts of the game well. They entered Tuesday's action 10th in the NBA in free throw attempts and dead last in free throw percentage. Granted, a large part of that is because Giannis is shooting around 50% from the line and taking roughly 10 minutes per free throw attempt, which is not helping things at all. But they're just not operating well in the margins, and sometimes I think that's sort of the deciding factor between a good team and a bad team.
All right, well, from a bad team to a good team, one that is firing on all cylinders, a team that hasn't lost yet. The Cleveland Cavaliers, 12 And no, Zach Adrian, if we can put up the list of teams here in NBA history that have started 12-0, we're talking about the creme de la creme. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The Cavs are the 7th team in history to start 12-0. And, forget even the success. Other ones have 2 have won championships. The rest haven't. But the fact that they are in this kind of exclusive territory, even for those optimistic about the Cavs coming into the year or who thought they would build on last year, obviously no one could have envisioned this. They absolutely waxed the Warriors in a big early season matchup between 2 of the hottest teams in the league. We can get into a bunch of things here, but on the top of your head, Chandler, we can start with you this time. What is the biggest change from last year to this year?
Well, I think there are 3 fundamental factors here, and chief among them, I want to credit Wolfond, because in our preseason predictions post for Coach of the Year, he selected Kenny Atkinson, and that might have flown over my head a little bit at the time, but it seems to be absolutely prescient. And I think the 2 biggest impacts that Atkinson has brought to the Cavs are probably Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. Mobley resembles a completely different player, one who previously was very hesitant and maybe led the league in head fakes, now appears far more assertive and seems to finally be up to the speed of the NBA and to have found his niche. And it's really quite great to see. And Garland is having a career year, albeit he made the All-Star game. I think it was 2020-21, but his efficiency is up across the board. And sometimes we talk, I think we're too focused sometimes on sort of the advanced metrics of basketball at the expense of the intangibles or the influence of a coach. But it simply just appears that Atkinson has players like Mobley and Garland who have dealt with a lot of self-doubt previously in their careers, believing in themselves. Pair that with the fact that they have 2 really ball-dominant guards in Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and all the complementary pieces, 1 through 10, seem to be fitting in quite nicely.
Yeah, I think I agree with basically everything you said, Chandler. I think the one thing I would push back on is calling Mitchell and Garland ball-dominant guards, which I guess historically you could say both of them have been, but I feel like a big change for the Cavs this year has been both of those guys being willing to get off the ball, because they both have skills that make them really effective off-ball players. And an important shift has been running more of the offense through Evan Mobley. I think that's like a crucial kind of tweak that Atkinson has come in and made. And we've talked about it before. Even like the last time I was on the show, we were talking about it with Anthony Davis, right? This is the way the league is trending, running more offense through these bigs. And one of the biggest benefits of that, there are a lot of benefits to that, but one of them is most of the time the big guys on the floor aren't necessarily going to be good spacers. And if they can be the ones who are running the offense, if you're putting the ball in their hands, that is mitigating some of the spacing issues.
Someone's got to be guarding them if they got the ball in their hands.
That's right. And especially if you're going to be using them as DHO hubs. You look at the way that the Warriors have used Draymond Green historically, right? Like, if a defender is going to be sagging 15 feet off of him, he's going to flow into a dribble handoff with Steph. He's going to set a good screen, and Steph's going to be wide open for 3. And so I think the Cavs, first of all, that doesn't work if Mobley hasn't taken the steps that he has taken in terms of just being more fluid, more decisive, more forceful in the way that he's playing at the offensive end. And so I think there have been a lot of things like that where it's a nice marriage of the players leveling up and them kind of like rising to meet what Atkinson is asking of them with his revamped scheme. And it has them, they're number 1 in offensive efficiency right now. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And because if you think the ways they have struggled over the last couple of years, the reasons they have kind of fallen apart in the playoffs has been offense. Their defense has been fine. Despite what everyone wants to say about them having 2 small guards, I say it all the time, those guys battle their asses off on defense, and they have an unbelievable security blanket behind them in Mobley and Allen. It's on offense where they've really struggled. So to see them, 3 weeks into the season with the number 1 offensive rating in the league is really impressive. And I do think part of that is, Garland having a huge bounce back from an injury-marred season last year.
He's been I'm not even exaggerating, like a top 10 player in the league through the first 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
He's been unbelievable. He's been and I don't, Mitchell's probably their best player, whatever. I don't think that matters. But, like, in terms of just this season, Darius Garland has been the best player on a 12-0 team.
Yeah, and as much credit as Mobley is due for taking on, like, a larger share of the offense, the majority of the advantages that offense is creating are the result of Garland and Mitchell with their dribble penetration, like their ability to just consistently get into the teeth of the defense, stress the defense with their shooting ability, make really good decisions with the ball, get other people involved. And it's just flowing very nicely right now. And I think, like, schematically, another thing you could point to that Atkinson's done in terms of improving the spacing is, and part of it is, like, putting the ball in the hands of Mobley and Allen more. Part of it's also when they're off the ball, they're not in the dunker spot nearly as much as they were in the past. You're seeing them, like, in the corners and above the break. And, yeah, maybe, like, the people guarding them aren't going to follow them all the way out there. But that's opening up opportunities for them to cut toward the basket. Like, and it's also just rearranging the floor geometry where it's making the help points for the centers guarding them a little bit more difficult and the rotations a little bit longer. And it's just kind of like little tweaks like that, coupled with the fact that these guys are all just playing better.
Yeah.
And the fact that their rotation is going like 11 deep with, like, and their bench is,
and
like...
And Strus hasn't played yet.
Yeah, Strus hasn't played yet. I mean, Ty Jerome, what a godsend for them.
I made a joke opening night that if you're, like, opening week overreactions, my most improved player ballot, 1, Evan Mobley, 2, Ty Jerome.
Yeah, incredible. Sorry to interrupt you. Incredible. Okay. Someone who previously in his career, Jerome, I thought was a complete non-factor, is now in his year 27, age 27, making a huge leap. And we've spoken about Allen and Mobley and Garland and Mitchell, but we haven't spoken about Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade, who have taken turns starting as that fifth starter, and George Niang, who is a player I have to admit I was not a big fan of in his previous tenures, is turned into sort of like a poor man's Dylan Brooks, like sort of this pest on the defensive end. And it just sort of points to, I think, Atkinson's success as a coach and what he's getting out of that bench. And like you said, we haven't even seen Max Strus yet, who's going to add a lot in terms of spacing and perimeter shooting. So I think we preface this whole segment by talking about, like, are they legit? Are they a playoff contender? And I still think Boston is, far and away the best team in the East, but I don't see a reason why Cleveland cannot compete when it comes playoff time. Like, they have all the makings of a successful playoff team.
And especially with Mobley being this guy, like, you mentioned the fluidity. Like, that's the thing. When I would watch Evan Mobley, that's what always kept me from believing he could be a legit star, is because I would watch him on offense. And it wasn't that he wasn't scoring efficiently, whatever, because that comes as guys age. It was like how rigid he looked with the ball in his hands, and as he got into his movements and putting the ball on the floor. And I just couldn't envision that guy who always looked that rigid and who, to be quite clear, like, never looked like it didn't look like the movement was getting more fluid as the years went on. I just couldn't envision that at some point he was going to miraculously become this fluid offensive player who was confident with the ball in his hands, who didn't second guess himself with the ball in his hands. I could not believe what I was seeing opening night, and he has proven that was not just an opening night mirage. Like, this seems to be who he is. And if that's the case, this team is absolutely right there. I don't want to be the guy in the show that's like, well, they're 12-0, but let's talk about whether they can last in April, but I'm going to be. All I want to know is, are they built for the playoffs? And what I mean by that is, Wolfond, we've talked before about how, for example, they were too reliant on one-way players for a long time, right? Like, whether you look at Mitchell and Garland, even though they battled, they're not exactly defensive difference makers. Then you look at the front court without a floor spacer. They never they could never find that glue guy at the three that could play both sides of the ball. From what you've seen so far, like, do you think this is now a team that is, forget whether they win or not, because only one team wins, but are they built to survive and succeed in the playoffs?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I wouldn't put them on Boston's level, but yeah, I don't see why this can't be the team that is in the conference finals, maybe giving them a run for their money. Like, I think the way that they are sort of marrying their strengths at both ends of the floor, and, again, Donovan Mitchell, maybe not difference maker, but I would say that he's, like, genuinely a positive defender at this stage. Not just in terms of, like, the way that he fights on ball, gets over screens, is able to like provide ball pressure. But like watch him off the ball. He's making timely help rotations, like acting as a pretty effective low man despite being what, like 6'1", 6'2". He's small, but he's long. Got like, I don't know, like what is his wingspan? Like 6'8", 6'9"?
Yeah, for a 6'4" guy, it's pretty big.
So it's, I think that has always been overstated, and it's always been overstated in terms of like a reason that they haven't been able to get over the hump in the playoffs. Because if you look at the numbers, their defense has always held up.
Yeah. I don't think it was overstated in Utah. I agree it's been overstated in Cleveland.
No. I just mean, I mean as a problem for the Cavs.
Right,
as a
yes.
reason that the Cavs were not going to be good enough in the playoffs. It was an issue for Garland last year. He got hunted over and over and over. But Garland last year was a guy who was playing like 15 pounds below his typical playing weight because he broke his jaw, was drinking through a straw, never really put the weight or the strength back on, and just was clearly not the same guy. And if you watch him play defense this year, it's a completely different player.
Yeah.
So I think, look, obviously like a lot still TBD, but I think in terms of the signs that we've seen thus far, I don't really see a reason why you wouldn't put this team, in the conversation among like dangerous playoff teams that are, should be expected to play like deep into the spring.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is like, they're relying a lot on their depth right now, which is not something that necessarily translates to the postseason.
When it's like a 7 or 8 man rotation game.
And of course, you can view it in a vacuum just based on the team and the individual's virtues. But once again, it bears repeating, the East is
Oh my God.
absolute garbage.
Gong show.
And even other teams that are currently in top 6 playoff spots are fraudulent and should have their eyes on the top end of the draft and guys like Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, and not on pointlessly winning games.
Yeah, a good segue to our last segment, which is a Western Conference team where there is no margin for error, but a team that's given themselves a nice cushion to start the year. That's the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have lost Chet Holmgren for, I was going to say 8 to 10 weeks, but it's really at least 8 to 10 weeks because the team's press release was that he would be reevaluated in 8 to 10 weeks after suffering a pelvic fracture a couple nights ago. So this is a team that's, 8-2 now. They just got a win in their first game without Chet. Jalen Williams, J-Dub, was playing center, essentially. How realistic is it for them to continue to play at this level without Chet? Because remember, they also are without Isaiah Hartenstein, who they signed in the offseason. So they're without both their, rotation centers, big men, whatever you want to call them. Chandler, you said you got some notes from what you saw first night without Chet. What did you see, and how realistic is it that you think it can continue?
I'll add they're also missing the other Jalen Williams,
Yes,
who over the last 2 seasons was second on their depth chart at center. And yes, Monday night they did beat the Clippers at home, 134-128, but they got killed on the boards, 47-28 margin. And while Chet is not yet at this point in his career an elite rebounder, he does lead the team with 8.7 boards per game, and he is third in the entire league with 2.6 blocks. They're not getting those type of numbers from other players. And like you said, they started the other Jalen Williams at center, and he did have a monster game with 28 points, but their tallest starter was Shea at 6'6". And while Clippers big man Ivica Zubac was a non-factor through basically the opening 3 quarters of that game, he was pretty dominant in the paint in the final stanza, and that allowed the Clippers, paired with Norman Powell being the second coming of Michael Jordan, creep back into the game. So situationally, a small lineup might work, but we might not have Chet back, like you said. Like, look, I'm no expert on, right iliac ring fracture. He might not be back till mid-January. Jalen Williams re-aggravated a hamstring strain. They're hoping to get him back in December. That's probably Isaiah Hartenstein, maybe late November, early December. So they're really hurting in the front court. And while it might have been enough to endure the victory over the Clippers, it's not sustainable over the long haul, especially in a deep West, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess I'm curious what, like, do they go out and try to just, like, grab a big man off of the
They got the assets to do whatever they want.
Well, I don't know if they want to, like, trade for one or just sort of, like, find one that they can sign as, like, a stopgap. just to maybe ease some of the physical strain that they're going to be putting on their smaller guys. Look, if there is any team in the league that is built to succeed playing micro ball for an extended stretch, it is the Thunder. They have experience doing it. Like this season, they've done it plenty when Chet's not on the floor because, like Chandler mentioned, not only do they not have Hartenstein, they haven't had Jalen Williams. They didn't have Kenrich Williams, who's like their longtime small ball 5 until Monday night's game. So they're very practiced at doing that. And their guards and wings are all pretty big for their positions, right? Like SGA at point guard is like 6'6", super long. Lou Dort is built like a brick house. Yeah. Like Jalen Williams is super broad and brawny. Like they are big wings and guards who can guard up. Like you can have Jalen Williams as the primary defender on Ivica Zubac and it not feel like a titanic mismatch. I think in terms of like the way that they're going to play, like the way that they're going to try and jerry-rig it, we got a pretty good illustration of that in that game against the Clippers where they basically dialed up the aggression, which is a crazy thing to do when you're already basically the most aggressive defense in the league. But they went all out to force as many turnovers as they could. And they're already forcing a historic number of turnovers. But they forced 23 on the Clippers last night. That is kind of their fail-safe and the thing that they do better than any defense that I've ever seen because of how quick they are, how amazing their hands are, how long they are up and down the roster. Like they're in the gaps. They're digging down on post-ups and drives. And in terms of like something that can give them a defensive floor, because I think offensively they're going to be fine.
Yeah, they'll be fine.
Like they'll miss certain things from Chet, like, his rim presence, his pick and pop ability. Like they run a lot of plays for him, especially in transition as like a trailer. That stuff's going to go away and they will miss it. But like they're still going to drive and kick relentlessly. They're still going to stress defenses out with the space they can create. And in terms of like them being a team that's equipped to play small offensively, all these guards are very practiced as screeners because in Mark Dagnall's system, like that's something that they've done a ton of is have guards screen. So defensively, it's like they're going all in on just forcing turnovers because they no longer have Chet there as one of the best rim protectors as a backstop. And it's a bit precarious. It's a bit of a high-wire act. They give up a ton more corner threes, not rim shots, but corner threes without Chet on the floor because they try to protect the rim by committee, have like 3, 4, sometimes 5 bodies in the paint collapsing on drives. So that's going to be the balance. Can they force enough of those turnovers to offset the fact that they're more vulnerable at the rim and going to give up more threes as a result?
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off, and also to their credit, you mentioned Mark Daigneault, who, as an aside, might have the most NHL coach name of any NBA coach. And I feel like in that context, we should call him Mark Daigneault. Shoutouts to Joe Mazzulla, who could totally be a disciple of the John Tortorella school of coaching, but they have a really good coach, and that's something we've referenced a few times on this episode, and who can react and make changes on the go, and that's why I still have a lot of faith in it. And you talked about should they go pick up a guy, Bismack Biyombo, if you're watching, stay by the phone or whatever, but I think they can probably sustain this until they get Hartenstein back. And then hopefully Holmgren by mid-January, even though his injury is quite rare. And it seems like one that's quite sort of pesky or fickle. Yeah. And I worry about his recovery. Even though we saw him the night of the injury, he was tweeting from the hospital, which we desperately need more of that. Like this generation needs this Kevin Durant. Like we need a new reply guy. Be that guy, Chet. Come on,
Chet, same weight, almost same frame as KD, gonna live up to the billing on social media as well. Yeah, I think you guys both said. I think offensively they'll be fine. I think between Shea and what they've got there, like they're going to be fine overall, but the defense is obviously going to take a hit. Wolfond has written about how the defense is pretty much historic in terms of how much better they are relative to league average than any defense before. We already saw that took a hit in the Clippers game. They won anyway. I think that's kind of what we'll see going forward. And to the broader point about the East versus West, the difference is the Cavs and Celtics, I think we're going to start talking about clinching scenarios like any day now in terms of being able to clinch a playoff spot. The Thunder in the West, it's like you're a 2 or 3 game losing streak away from being 11th. So we'll see how that all shapes up. So thanks to Wolfond and Chandler, but for now, I want to go to Howard Beck, NBA reporter at The Ringer, president of the Professional Basketball Writers Association. Howard, how you doing, man?
I'm great. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to have you, not just to talk basketball, but also because, as I mentioned in your intro, in addition to being a veteran reporter, senior NBA writer at The Ringer, you're also president of the Professional Basketball Writers Association. I've been in those meetings with you. And last week, ESPN's Brian Windhorst made some news and made some waves, I'd say, around the NBA media world when he said that he thought NBA media isn't in a good place right now because we're devaluing the things that build the league up. And I know you tweeted about this. You have some thoughts on it. So I wanted to know your perspective as a veteran NBA reporter who's been around the league for a while. What are your thoughts on that statement and that hypothesis, I guess?
Yeah, I elaborated even further on those thoughts on Blue Sky, by the way, as opposed to the other site. So people can go check me out there, sign up on Blue Sky. I want to just make clear, like I'm speaking today on behalf of only, of course, myself, not the Ringer, and certainly not on behalf of the Pro Basketball Writers Association today. So these will be my opinions. I was glad that Brian said what he said, that Wendy said what he said, just because these are concerns that I think a lot of us have had, certainly I've had for a long time, in just the direction overall of sports media in the last 5 years, 10 years, maybe it's been longer, but I think more like the last 5 to 10, where it feels like a lot of media companies, various platforms, various, I think, decision makers have redirected everything toward whether the lowest hanging fruit, right? Viral content, aggregation, takes because they're cheap. News breaking part of this too, but our ecosystem, I feel like, has tipped way too heavily toward all these other things and away from the word that Wendy used, which is storytelling, that we don't have enough storytelling. And there's probably dozens of reasons for that. And some of that is on us, the journalists, the reporters and editors who provide the content, right? Who create the content. But some of it's the way that the audience has moved. Some of it is just the time that we live in. Everything can be measured. There's an analytic for everything, including what people are clicking on and how long they stay on the thing that they just clicked on. We didn't have that once upon a time. Wendy and I both came up as newspaper guys. And once upon a time, I would write a story. I'd send it to my editor. They would put it, in the system. It would go on a printed page and land on somebody's doorstep. And you have no idea the next day, no matter how many newspapers were sold, did they read my story? Were they just picking it up for the classifieds, for the comic strips, for Dear Abby? I don't know. There was a certain blissful ignorance to that time when you were not writing for engagement or writing to try to, hit certain notes. You were just writing what you thought needed to be written. And sometimes that's opinion, sometimes that's features, whatever. But in the current environment where everything can be measured, I think we are now out of balance. I think that too many decision makers, including a lot of people that I have worked for in the past, thankfully not the place I work now. The Ringer is great about this. Like, we're just try to do the best stuff, period. But I have worked at places where they absolutely were, I think, way too focused on what generates the most engagement or the most clicks. I hate to admit that as a journalist. It pains me to say it, but it's unquestionable that whether it's print or TV or otherwise, in the environment that we live in now, it has tipped too far in the direction of trying to simply get engagement as opposed to leaving room for more in-depth storytelling.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it there with the balance and finding that balance as well. I think, that is important because, look, obviously, as two people that cover the NBA, we know that the storylines in this league definitely dwarf a lot of the storylines in other leagues. It is a very fast-paced moving league, and obviously people are interested in those things. They're interested in things like transactions and player movements and all that stuff, and I think there's obviously room for that, but the balance, I agree, is what isn't there anymore. And I wonder, too, how much of it, like you talk about the measurables that are out there now that we have access to, I wonder, too, how much of it is just, the changing of the times. Like I hear people all the time talk about how the 24/7 news channel and news cycle changed politics. And I also wonder how, the modern day with social media and smartphones and how fast we can get news and how readily available it is and how many more media people and companies are out there, how that has changed sports and the way we consume them as well. Because obviously, more opportunities and more access, that's great. for people and for fans, but there can also be a blessing and a curse kind of part of it too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think more voices is a net plus. But the audience gets a little fractured because of that too. And I think because of that, it probably puts editors and publishers of traditional media in a position where they're like, well, if it's harder to capture audience and keep them engaged, now it makes you, or it pushes you to make different kinds of choices about the kinds of content that you are commissioning or that you are pushing your reporters to do. So I think that's part of it. I think there's so many things, right? A lot of this is just a unfortunate chicken and egg thing, right? Why does, I don't want to pick on any one outlet, but like, why does anybody chase, a ton of LeBron stories or constantly pump out more? Because you keep clicking on them. Why do the debate shows keep talking about LeBron versus MJ or whatever the debate of the day may be? Because you keep watching.
Yeah.
Why are companies valuing certain kinds of personalities over others, or certain reporters over others? Like, a lot of this is because the audience is going that way. Now, that doesn't mean we can't stand on principle as journalists or as media companies. We can still make the decisions that, what, I know we could just pump out 50 LeBron stories in a row, but it's kind of important for us to cover the Memphis Grizzlies and the Indiana Pacers and the Charlotte Hornets. And I'm not, I guess I am subconsciously going straight to the smaller markets, but it's important to cover it all. That we're supposed to be comprehensive in what we do, and not only by market or by player, but in types of coverage. So again, back to Wendy's premise, storytelling. Where's the storytelling gone? There institutionally, we just don't have as many media companies as invested in-depth storytelling, feature writing as we once did, right? The New York Times does not have a sports section. I spent 9 years at the New York Times. That sports section does not exist as it once did. Obviously, we have The Athletic is now the New York Times' sports section, but it's not the same as what the Times sports section was or represented. It's a different kind of coverage. And, besides that, for a while there was both The Athletic and the Times sports section. A lot of the major newspapers over time, of course, have had their resources dwindle. And Sports Illustrated was once a weekly magazine and is now monthly. There's not as much investment across sports media in-depth feature writing and storytelling in the way there once was, and it's been pushed out, I think, by a lot of the other stuff. Transactions, rumors, viral content.
Yeah. I do want to get to a couple of your favorite storylines so far this season, but before I do, not to turn this fully into a PBWA meeting here, but I did want your thoughts on how unintentionally complicit do you think the league itself is in it? And what I mean by that is, look, I mean, it's no secret that if you talk to a reporter from a bygone era and you compare it to the way things are now, access to players from a personal perspective isn't the same. Teams are much more conservative about how they dole out that access and whether you get that access at all. And so on one hand, you will have Adam Silver talk about how, he wishes there would be, more educating in basketball journalism and talking about what's going on as opposed to always the lowest hanging fruit. But at the same time, his league and the teams involved aren't exactly giving the more journalists that are out there in today's day and age the same access that there was maybe 20, 30 years ago.
I started covering the league in 1997. I was a Laker beat writer for 7 years through the Shaq and Kobe era, and then I spent 9 years at the Times covering the Knicks. And so I had 16 years where every day I'm covering a game or a practice or a shoot around, and I'm in locker rooms and everywhere else. And I can tell you, and anybody who's been around for any length of time will tell you, yeah, we have less access now than we once did. And that has consequences on all sorts of levels. But to the point of this discussion, yeah, it impairs your ability to really build up the kind of rapport with players that fosters trust, that fosters the willingness to then sit down and talk more in depth about whatever it may be, their hobbies, their family, their upbringing, their basketball education, their whatever it may be. And to me, those are the stories that as a reader, as a fan in my youth, drew me to the game or to the athletes that I loved watching, right? It's not just what we see them do on the court or on the field. We want to know about them as individuals, as people. And it's harder to get to know them now, even though they can reach out directly through social media and all kinds of other channels. A deeply reported feature story, there's just no substitute for. And the NBA, it's harder to cover it on that level and to get to know guys in a way that then generates those kinds of in-depth stories than it was when I first started, 27 years ago. So the league does bear some responsibility for this. The changing media environment that we've just been discussing is part of this as well. Like I say, it's a lot of different forces at work, and economic forces too, because deep reporting requires money. It requires spending, and a lot of media companies don't have as much available to spend on that stuff as they used to either.
Yeah. On today's show, on this panel, I mean, we talked about the Bucks and the disaster that they've been to start the season, and Holmgren's injury in Oklahoma City and the Cavs' perfect start. So kind of on the note of what we're talking about, obviously not to the same depths of storytelling, but what are maybe some storylines, stories, teams, players around the league through the first 3 weeks of the season that have caught your eye that you think maybe aren't getting the attention they deserve?
I don't know about like not getting the attention they deserve. I mean, we're so early in the season that, for me, somebody who tries to live in the nuance zone, I'm trying not to overreact to anything in any particular direction, right? But it's notable that the Bucks obviously are 2-8, and it's notable that the Cavaliers are 12-0, and we didn't expect either of those things. The Warriors have come out to a blazing start, and that's been really interesting and kind of fun to watch. I don't know about below the radar. Like it almost like there's no below the radar anymore. If you live on social media as much as we all do, and you're watching this stuff, like if I named any single team or trend, you'd say like, yeah, I think I've read about that or listened to a podcast about that. I don't know that there's anything that immediately springs to mind there.
Okay, what about this? Between the Bucks disaster start and the Cavs perfect start, and I don't mean, whether you think they'll go 82-0, but which one do you believe in more as a long-term story as opposed to a trend early in the season?
Yeah, they'll both, regress to the mean a little bit, right? Because the Cavs won't go 82-0. Yeah. But I do think it's a revelation to see what the Cavs have done. And even if you factor in strength of schedule, and it hasn't been that strong of a schedule for them, what they're doing, like 12 in a row, 12-0 under any circumstances is an achievement, and it's an indication of something. Has Kenny Atkinson, who's in his first year as head coach there, figured out some things that his predecessors did not? Or is it just because maybe Darius Garland and Evan Mobley are making a leap that they were just going to make anyway? Is there just a little more cohesion in that group? And I think we're still trying to figure out like what are the secrets to their success so far, and how far does it reach? But I will say this to your question, that's the more sustainable of the two, in that I won't be surprised at all if the Cavs are in the conference finals next spring. I'll be less surprised at that than the Bucks like getting knocked out of the play-in or something. And that's because the Bucks had some fundamental problems that were already evident before the season began. And as great as Giannis is, as great as Dame Lillard is, even at this late stage of his career, they've just gotten old in a lot of spots. They don't play defense at the level that they used to. Their offense doesn't have quite the dynamism it needs. It's too reliant on the two stars. So I'm shocked that the Bucks are as bad as they are. I thought they were a top 4 team in the East. I certainly didn't think that they would be a team that would struggle to make the play-in. And ultimately, I don't think they will struggle to make the play-in, but they might actually be a play-in team or just a low playoff team. And that's still a little stunning to me.
Yeah, it's especially stunning when you consider the state of the East. When you look at the fact that, there's only right now 2 winning teams. We know that it's not the deepest conference. If someone had told you coming into the year, not only will the Bucks struggle, they're going to be a play-in team in this Eastern Conference. I think that would have caught a lot of people by surprise.
For sure. And, look, comfort for them, if this is comfort at all, the East is just so mediocre right now. Yeah. We thought the East was really getting strong, right? Like the Knicks had this incredible season. Yeah, like we thought it was going to start to be top heavy. We thought it'd be like 4 or 5, 6 deep and fall off. And instead it's like 2 deep and then falls off to the Pacers at 5-5 are in 3rd place. But some of that is just the early season kind of just malaise that teams are going through, and like the Knicks are adjusting to 2 new starters, like, significant new starters in Bridges and Towns. I think the Knicks will be better than they are. The Sixers have struggled because Embiid's been out and Paul George was out, and now Tyrese Maxey is out. But I think the Sixers, when all is said and done, they and the Knicks will still be right up there with the Celtics and Cavs among the leaders in the East. The Magic are missing Paolo Banchero. The Pacers are starting to get their legs under them, I think. So It'll look better than this, I believe, by the time we get to April. And I do think we'll have like 5-6 legit teams toward the top there. But I'm not sure which 6 anymore.
Yeah, I'm completely with you there. And the Celtics and the Cavs have definitely earned a reputation as being a cut above for now. Last thing before I let you go, the NBA Cup tips off tonight, depending on when someone's watching this. Maybe it's already tipped off. But we saw last year how the Lakers, who, by no means were a bad team on paper, but weren't quite the contender that they once were. We saw how, a few good weeks and just well-timed good play spurred them to an NBA Cup victory. Is there a team in the league that you think, they're good enough, maybe not quite good enough to win a championship, but for whatever reason, they've just got enough that in an early season tournament, you can point to them and be like, watch out for that team in this cup format?
That's an interesting thought. I think one of the really tough things for me since they invented this is that because of group play, it's hard to it's not like with the beginning of the playoffs, you know exactly who's in the running and you can kind of map out how this is going to go, how you think it's going to go. You have group play and then the top 8 teams out of group play. Now you've got brackets and now it's single eliminate. Like trying to game out that whole thing as we sit here on November 12th, hours before it starts, is really hard. But it would be interesting if it's like, the Rockets are an up and coming team. We don't expect to be a contender. We expect they might actually be a playoff team this season. But if the Rockets were one of the teams in the NBA Cup final, and like the scrappy, overachieving Brooklyn Nets were the other team, like that would be really interesting. And one of those teams would end up winning a cup and a banner that they otherwise have no hope of getting in the real postseason or the real playoffs next spring. And so I think for that purpose, that's the interesting aspect of the cup, right? Like you can reward teams or have teams play for something of substance. I'm skeptical of the substance of it personally, but there is something at stake in December that we didn't have before. Yeah. And it does give teams outside of the top 3% to make a mark and also just get meaningful experience in higher pressure games. And the Pacers certainly benefited from that last December before making a really nice playoff run.
Yeah. I mean, I can't wait for the day. It's going to happen eventually. But you mentioned like the overachieving Nets this year, but for a team like that to maybe not win it, but like go to the final or something, I think that would be a hilarious and interesting subplot early in the season. And I kind of feel like the Nuggets this year are, like a team where I've lost a bit of faith in them as being able to survive the rigors of the entire season just because of the talent drain over the last couple years. And so I maybe can't quite see them anymore going the whole 6 to 8 month gauntlet required to win a championship. But that's a team where I'm like, but in a short early season format with Jokic playing out of his mind, even for his standards, like that's the type of team I'm like, yeah, I can see Denver winning this thing, even though I don't quite buy them as much as an overall contender anymore.
Yeah, same. I don't really think they're in the mix now. They've lost too much talent and I who knows? Like they still got Jokic, who's the consensus best basketball player on earth, and there's still a scenario where they make a run to the finals. But yeah, I've got less faith in them, and I think it'd be really interesting for them to make the Cup finals and win that, because how would they react to it, right? Like,
right.
This is not what you're really playing for. You were supposed to be the new dynasty. You were supposed to, and you've just done nothing but watch your roster erode over the last couple of seasons. I think it would be bittersweet. I mean, we know Jokic doesn't celebrate even NBA championships, right? Like, I guess the good news for him would be, listen, Nikola, for this one, there's no parade. There's no parade. But on the other hand, there's still more NBA season, so you don't get to go home to your horses yet either. So.
Yeah, that should be his reward. I mean, they tried to entice the rest of the NBA with some of the cash prizes for winning. Jokic's reward should be that he gets a week off in December to go home to his horses if they win. And I think we'll see another level of Jokic somehow.
We should customize it. Every individual or every star should have their own reward to incentivize them. I love that one.
Yeah, now we're thinking big. All right, Howard, appreciate you taking the time today. Definitely love to have you on again throughout the season. And if you're ever in Toronto, we'd love to have you in the studio.
Absolutely. We'll let you know. And thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks to Howard Beck for that conversation there. Thanks to Joe Wolfond and Michael Chandler for hopping on the panel earlier. Thanks to Zach and Adrian in the control room. My name is Joseph Casciaro. This has been the Unfiltered Show. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.